Hey guys, Mr. Talbot here for you. We're going to be diving into the next part of our topic 3.2. This is going to go along really well with that organizer you did on 3.1. So a lot of these enlightenment ideas, you should be thinking back to some of those thinkers that you did in that assignment. So hopefully that's going to help as we kind of go through. Make sure as you're doing your notes, you're checking out what's in the study guide because all those things are going to kind of help connect to our learning objective today. And we got some key terms that we've kind of bolded and things I want you to be thinking about as you're kind of laying out your notes. So it might be a good strategy to pause yourself, pause the video here, check the study guide, check this slide, look at the bold terms, and maybe kind of laying out your notes. Because what we're going to be talking about today is the ideas that are eventually going to lead to revolutions, and we'll get to the revolutions in our next video. Um, One of the big things that kind of feeds into the Enlightenment and then builds off it's going to be the scientific revolution. And really, with that, people are going to be starting to think about the world in a new way and kind of looking at it as if the world's kind of governed by natural laws. And that affects both people, politics, and science. And with that kind of belief in science and experimentation, we're going to see the idea of reason. You can reason, you can logic, you can figure things out. And once you figure things out, you can make things better. Those are going to be some core beliefs of our thinkers at this time. So we're going to see them talk about things like, individualism, natural rights, the social contract, separation of church and state, all things we're going to be touching on in this video. So we want to kind of lay out, okay, how do we get to this point in history? So if you think about kind of what we talked about in the previous unit, we had the Renaissance where we had to kind of that rise of humanism. We're looking at individuals, not so much you're part of a group, you're an individual. And once you start believing people are individuals, you're going to start thinking individuals might have rights. So that can be that connection. We think about the Protestant Reformation. How does that lead to the Enlightenment? Well, remember at the time, the biggest kind of controller of society was the Catholic Church. Well, the Reformation is a direct challenge to that top authority. The second biggest power structure at the time in Western Europe is going to be the monarchs. And then we know from the previous topic, 3.1, that monarchs were in fact becoming more and more powerful as the Catholic Church was going down in power. Well, you just challenged the old top authority, which is the Catholic Church. There's no reason you're not now going to turn around and challenge the new top authority, which are those absolute monarchs. So Enlightenment thinkers are going to be rejecting absolute monarchs. And so with that, we're going to see monarchs that are going to be more constrained, and also we're going to see systems of government that don't have monarchs, don't have a one centralized leader. Um, an interesting thing to think about is that the Enlightenment is occurring basically in the 1700s and into the 1800s. We kind of see a lot of these revolutions taking off. What's unique and kind of thought-provoking about this is the juxtaposition, love that word, of what Europe is kind of espousing their values are. We are, and eventually the United States, are going to espouse values. We believe in individual rights, self-determination, that you shouldn't be oppressing other people. Well, at the same time, these, European governments and eventually the United States, they're going to be spreading, into their own colonies and their own empires. They're going to be influencing and oppressing indigenous peoples around the world. At the same time, they're saying we need to stop being oppressed by our own government at home. So it's kind of a weird one. Humans aren't perfect. And so sometimes, humans are hypocritical. We see that a bit during this time period. So what's going on as well, and kind of in a sense, the scientific revolution feeds into the Enlightenment and is going to kind of grow out of it. So the scientific revolution is kind of the birth of modern science as the scientific method. You can experiment and you can figure things out. This is really a direct challenge to religious authority at the time because religious authority is saying, the things are the way things are because of the, God just made it that way. Well, now there's going to be challenges. Okay, well, things are that way because nature has been set up in a certain way. There are these natural laws. Once we figure it out, we shouldn't just be using science to figure things out, as kind of the ancient Greeks did. We should be using science to now make things better. We should be making progress. That's going to be then pushing out of not just the scientific realm, it's going to be pushing into politics. And so we're going to see things like, how we set up society. So political science and economics is now going to be a thing that is studied. And again, the goal of studying it is to improve upon it. to learn and improve society, to make progress. Progress is a core belief of the Enlightenment. And so with that, we're also going to think that, again, that idea of experimenting in science is going to transfer over into politics. We can experiment. Okay, well, let's try and set up a government this way. So that sometimes you're going to hear people talk about America as an experiment. In the belief of the founding fathers, it really was an experiment. Okay, will democracy actually work? Let's figure it out. Let's experiment. And so the scientific revolution kind of feeds this idea of reason, of logic, of understanding things, and then, you know, using science to understand it. Once you understand it, you can make progress. And with that, government should be helping to make that progress. Government should be trying to understand things. Government should be trying to improve. An absolute monarch wasn't trying to improve. The absolute monarch had all the power, and just whatever they decided, that's the way it was. An enlightened government is always trying to improve, figure out how the things do better, figure out how to benefit the people in society. Now, at this time period, it's important to remember who we exactly consider the people in the society depends on who you ask. Certainly Thomas Jefferson, we would consider him an enlightened person, but he's also a slave owner, so he isn't really thinking of slaves as part of the society. In time, his ideas are going to be used, we're going to see in 3.4, to end slavery, which is going to be a good thing that comes out of this. But with the time period of a lot of these ideas, who's considered the people in society? It's a bit up for debate. Same thing's going to apply to women. Same thing's going to apply a lot of times to poor people. Um, this idea of constantly making progress, constantly improving society is eventually going to help all of those other groups be brought into society and recognized as part of the society. So the graph to the right here, I kind of show is population growth. The reason our population has been able to grow so much is the improvements we've made in science, improvements we've made in agriculture, improvements we've made in healthcare, improvements we've made in infant care. All of these things help to support a larger and larger population. That's not possible without a society and a system built on making progress. If I was to tell you in 1940, the world population was about 2 billion people. And if I told you 80 years later in 2020 that the population of the world is going to be over 7 billion people, you would have looked at me like I'm a crazy person. Then if I told you that with that many more people, the amount of people starving in the world was going to be actually going down. The number of wars and how big the wars were was going to be going down. We were going to be making all this progress. No one would have believed you, but this is kind of the what we've been able to have in our modern world because of what started in the Enlightenment. Now, with this and this idea of using reason to explain everything, not religion, well, that's a really big challenge to religious authority. Voltaire, one of our Enlightenment thinkers, says that we should have a separation of church and state, that the government should not be influencing the religion people follow, should not have an official religion. That is a really big change from what happened before, where we had the idea of his realm, his religion. So with that separation of church and state, you're also separating the idea of divine right of rulers. So it's a big challenge to authority. This isn't to say that enlightened thinkers were all anti-religion. A lot of them valued religion and felt it actually helped bind society together. They just thought religion shouldn't be used to explain everything. Instead, we should be using reason and science to explain those things. So what are some of the ideals these people come up with? Well, first and foremost, we're going to be rejecting the idea of an absolute monarch. We're going to reject absolutism because an absolute monarch doesn't care about any of the stuff listed on this slide. They don't care about giving their people freedom. They don't. If an absolute monarch doesn't believe that they should be limited, okay? An absolute monarch certainly says, you don't need freedom, you need me. Well, enlightened thinkers are going to say, no, people need freedom. Now, again, we think about the slavery issue. The United States in the 1700s, a lot of them aren't willing to kind of cast that off. We see in Haiti a revolution that we're going to learn about in the next topic, led by slaves, very much says, no, everyone does need freedom. So the Haitians are very much inspired by this. We're going to see the idea of natural rights. Again, there's a way the world's been set up, and people are going to be born with these rights. And these rights can't be taken away, and the government has a responsibility to protect those rights. Locke's going to call them life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson's going to just swap out the property for pursuit of happiness. People should be able to determine who their leaders are. Okay, that's going to mean they should be able to have their independent country if need be in places like the United States or later in Latin America, and also that that the government gets their power from the people and the consent of the governed, not that divine right from God. So it's a big, big change that's coming out of the Enlightenment. Kind of government comes, power of government comes from the bottom, the people, not from the top in a God figure. One of the biggest ideas, and certainly something to take notes on, certainly something to know for the unit test as well as life, is the idea of the social contract. And so there's kind of two competing ideas of the social contract at this time period. One comes from Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes lived through a civil war, time of great chaos when there wasn't really an established government. He pretty much says without a government, life is terrible, it's nasty, short, and brutish, as his famous quote. He's going to say that it's so bad, any government is better. And so we're going to give up our freedom and do what the government says. And if that government wants to give us freedom, cool. If that government wants to take away freedom, that's fine. Locke is the opposite. Locke is a lot more what as Americans we're used to. No, no, no. Yes, we have a government. Yes, we agree to follow their rules as long as their rules aren't taking away our natural rights, things like life, liberty, property, those sorts of things. We know there's kind of debate over, how much freedom can the government take before they're violating that natural right. There's big debate on for those issues, and people like Rousseau kind of get into that, and some other thinkers that you read about in 3.1. So some big effects of the Enlightenment as we finish out here. Democracy and republicanism or republics are going to become more and more common forms of government. Things like we're going to see a republic in the United States, and we're going to see, people voting on things in forms of democracy. We're going to see a republic in France after their revolution. We're going to see a form of a republic and democracy in Haiti, although there's still some other elements. You'll see that if you choose to research that one. We're going to see a limited government, a limited monarch in England. All of this is going to be hit in the next topic. So absolutism is going out of style. Democracy and republics are coming into style. And again, we're going to see society continue to improve over time. So those are all things to kind of fill out for your notes. Don't forget about the study guide and that check for understanding quiz.